Good evening, everyone. My name is Allison Kaiser. I'm a freshman in engineering, and I'm the secretary of Gamma Rho Lambda. We're currently a colony, a sorority for the LGBTQ community and ally community as well at Iowa State. I'm pleased to welcome you here on this very special night. Each year on November 20th, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and ally community gathers across the globe to memorialize and honor those who we have lost due to anti-transgender violence, hatred, prejudice. Vigils occur across the world and are united as part of the growing number of communities joining together for International Transgender Day of Remembrance.
This year, several student and community organizations, including Gamma Rho Lambda, the LGBT Alliance, the LGBT Faculty and Staff Association at Iowa State, the LGBT Student Services Center, the Margaret Sloss Women's Center, the Committee on Lectures, MISPAC, and a key organizer and partner, the Parents, Friends, and Family of Lesbian and Gays, also known as PFLAG of Ames. Thank you. Have partnered together to bring Ellen Krug to Iowa State University as part of our International Transgender Day of Remembrance events. Ellen has been providing presentations, workshops, and discussion throughout the day today and joins us tonight for this very special event.
Ellen, also known as Ellie, the author of Getting to Ellen, a memoir about love, honesty, and gender change, transitioned from male to female in 2009. A graduate of Coe College and Boston College Law School, Ellie practiced as a trial attorney in Boston and Cedar Rapids for 28 years. Before changing careers, she became the only Iowa attorney and one of the few in the nation to try lawsuits in separate genders. She speaks fluently about living as a transgender person, including how her perspectives on gender have changed. Her talks have included lessons learning about the need to live authentically and true to oneself. Ellie currently works as the executive director of a Twin Cities-based nonprofit, where she also writes for Lavender Magazine and Access Line. Tonight, Ellie will be presenting a talk entitled Living as Transgender. Please help me provide a warm Iowa State welcome to Ellie.
I really don't need the mic with this voice. I am, to say the least, I am overwhelmed by the number of people here and the response to my talk, to people coming. And I just want to thank you for being here. I've diverted from my remarks, which is something you'll find me doing all night, but I cannot in words really express to you how honored I am to be here. I have been treated like a rock star today. And let me just tell you, everybody at least once in their life should be treated like a rock star. It does wonders for the ego. But let me get to my remarks, and if you see me like going to my phone, the only reason for that is there is no clock in here. It's not that I'm expecting a phone call or a text, although there is somebody I'm waiting to hear from. No, it'll be all good. I want to thank Brad and Allison for that wonderful introduction, and I also want to thank again the organizations that have brought me here. I won't go through the list again, but I just want to tell you that there were many, many moving parts that got me here. And it was as the result of what I really believe in, which is collaboration. But I also want to thank some specific individuals for getting me here. And they include Pat Spangler, Paul and Linda Kaufman, Cindy Drury, Allison Carlton, Brad Freehofer, Sarah Miller, and Blake Miller. All of these folks have been communicating with me, putting up with my endless emails for the last 3 months about this event. And so, as I said, a lot of moving parts have gone into getting me here. I also have to admit that speaking from a scripted speech is not my usual practice. I just read that. I've always spoken extemporaneously, but tonight I felt the need to have my words documented. That doesn't mean that I won't lapse into speaking from the heart or off the cuff, and you'll certainly know if and when I do that. Please just work with me on it, and by all means, I will take questions afterwards. And by all means, put up with me and my hair because it gets in the way. You know, and I could have pulled it back, but no, I'm too vain. I wanted my hair hanging down tonight. To the extent I use names here, some will be pseudonyms. As I write in my memoir, my life has intersected with many people. Not all of them have wanted to take my gender journey with me. I respect that, and I have tried to give them their desired space. By the way, can everybody hear me? Are we all good with sound? Okay, great. One last preliminary. I'm Buddhist, and I subscribe to the view of living life as a small I, not as a big I. I'm really no one extraordinary. Like most of you, I'm a survivor. I've just made my way through life. I've been lucky enough, though, to have a platform that's come with that. Not many people, let alone T's or L's or G's or B's, have the opportunity to reach as many people as I do. And again, we're back to being honored. And we're back to, frankly, something I view as sacred, which is my ability to express some views to folks, hope that they will go along with them, but if they won't, most of all, that it will stimulate them to think. And we'll get into that as I do my talk. And no, I don't have it all figured out. There are still things that I'm working on, trust me. Nonetheless, I will share parts of my personal story tonight because I believe in the power of stories. Some of you heard this today in your classes when I spoke. Stories are the one surefire way of connecting with others. The lessons inherent in personal stories ripple from person to person, human to human. And in that way, all of us have a vested interest in ensuring that people tell their stories. Indeed, that's the very first thing I ask someone new in my life. Please, tell me your story. Thus, it's not all about me, but then again, it's hard to share without saying something about your life. I'm also no expert at anything. Yes, I've had 17 years of therapy, and yes, that's automatically qualified me to hold a therapist license in 22 different states and 3 provinces of Canada. Still, I'm just an ordinary person who's simply lucky enough to be standing here in front of you. The title of my talk, as Allison related, is Living as Transgender, but there's something I've added to that, which is living as transgender, quote, compassion for oneself and for others. And you'll hear me use the word compassion quite a bit tonight. And thus, on this sacred day for transgender people, our day of remembrance, I'd like to set a tone of hope and promise. Yes, of course, we need to honor those who have suffered and those who we've lost. But I also believe in inspiring others to lead healthy and satisfying lives. Diversion. I am here to tell you. Some of the things I'm going to talk about are downers, but I am here to tell you, to report to you, that life can be good, that it can work, that you can be happy, that you can be satisfied. It takes work, but it can happen. Let me begin with a quick story. In May 2009, I transitioned from man to woman. By then, I had been a trial lawyer for 27 years with a very successful practice near Cedar Rapids. On a Monday morning in early May, I sent more than 200 emails, letters, and notes to clients, lawyers, judges, and friends. I explained that I had long fought with myself over gender identity, and that the woman inside me had finally won the battle. From that day on, I would present only as female and only be known as Ellen to my friends, Ellie. You're all my friends. You can call me Ellie. I gave my clients the opportunity to secure new counsel if this troubled them. The reaction from my fellow Iowans was overwhelmingly positive. I love Iowans. I do. I love my fellow Iowans. Because the reaction from them was like this. I received phone calls, emails, and letters from supportive colleagues and clients. In particular, a man and a woman, 2 attorneys from a large Cedar Rapids firm, called to congratulate me. They asked, "What can we do to help you?" I was so incredibly touched. Barely 2 months later, in July 2009, I tried what had to be the first jury trial by an openly transgender lawyer in Iowa history. I asked each jury member to view me, not to view me, a transgender person, as a reason to find against my clients. In turn, the jury promised they wouldn't hold me against my clients. After 4 days of trial, the jury came back in my client's favor, just as I had hoped. The brain was still good. The body might have been different. Okay. It was a magnificent victory moment and all that I could have dreamed of. It made me believe that, yes, even as a woman with an incredibly deep voice, I could succeed as a trial lawyer. As importantly, I now believe that my law firm would survive, and the 4 people who relied on me for their livelihoods and jobs would remain employed. That was July 2009. Unfortunately, by November, just 4 months later, many of my business clients had slowly walked away. The death knell from my firm came in early November when my biggest client called up out of the blue and ordered me to immediately cease all work on its files. It demanded that I deliver every one of its files to its home office by the end of that day. That one phone call sounded the death knell of what had been the Krug Law Firm. By 3 months later, March 2010, I had laid off everyone and closed the firm. I then relocated to Minneapolis to start a new life, and an incredibly happy one, as a writer and a non-profit leader. But that's only part of the story. On the last Monday in November 2009, a couple weeks after that sentinel phone call from my major client, and after it became clear that my firm was lost, I received another phone call. This one was from a Des Moines lawyer, someone who had received my coming out letter 6 months before. Again, it was another call out of the blue. I hadn't talked to this lawyer in months. We had had several cases together, and while we were very cordial and liked each other, we weren't the type of friends who lunched or had drinks or picked up the phone to just shoot the breeze. Here's how the call went. Des Moines lawyer: Ellen, I thought of you yesterday. How are you doing? How is it going? Me: well, it could be better. It looks like I'll have to close the law firm. Des Moines lawyer: I'm sorry to hear that, Ellen, but are you okay? At this point, with me being a lawyer who's trained to pick up on things, I figured that something was up. I didn't know what, but certainly I wanted to reassure. Yes, I'm okay. Despite all of the crap, I'm good. I have the one person I need. I have me, Ellie Krug. I sensed relief on the other end of the phone. That's good to hear, Ellen. Real good to hear. We talked for a while about a case still ongoing between us and life in general. The Des Moines lawyer then related the reason for his call. Over the weekend, he had heard about a transgender person named Christine Daniels, who had committed suicide. Daniels had been a sports writer with the Los Angeles Times, who had transitioned from man to woman and then back to man. Daniels had taken her life just a few days before the phone call. It had been the talk on the Sunday football shows. Knowing me, the Des Moines lawyer became concerned. He decided to reach out. He decided to care. It was, in the end, a phone call I would remember for the rest of my life. And it's been a phone call that I've now shared with thousands of people as I talk about my story. Truth be told, I hadn't heard of Christine Daniels, and I didn't know anything about her very public transition or struggles. Later, of course, I investigated. I learned that, like me, she had been married. And like me, she loved her wife a great deal. I further learned that the wife rejected Christine as she transitioned. The wife then filed for divorce. The guilt and loss Christine suffered with losing her soulmate were so overwhelming that Christine did something that most transgender people who transition can't possibly fathom. Christine detransitioned and went back to living as a man. Unfortunately, that didn't bring back Christine's wife. And in the end, it only added to Christine's crippling depression. On the 1-year anniversary of Christine's divorce being finalized, Christine hooked a tube to the tailpipe of her Toyota Camry, parked and running in her garage, and got in the car. Someone later found her and tried CPR, but it was too late. Christine Daniels was dead at age 52. I will come back to the Des Moines lawyer's phone call at the end of this talk, but for now, please let me address the subject of suicide and how intertwined it is with transgender people. First off, please understand that I know a thing or two about suicide. My father killed himself when I was 33 years old. He was alcoholic, depressed, and as I found out after his death, probably a bisexual sex addict. Despite many pleas by family members, including me, my father never got help. Instead, he crawled into a bathtub one afternoon in January 1990 and put a pistol into his mouth and pulled the trigger. I don't tell you this to ask for sympathy. I tell you this so that you understand the severity of what depression and loss and hopelessness can do. In killing himself, my father lost so very much. There were grandchildren he'd never see, places he'd never go, and sobriety he'd never achieve. What a waste. Just as Christine Daniels' death was a waste. And of course, a tragedy. Many of you know that the statistics for transgender people relative to suicide are staggering. The incidence of completed suicides for the general population is 12.1 persons per 100,000. Now, I'm going to mix up the numbers a little bit, so be warned. So I'm moving from completed suicides to attempted suicides, and for trans people, the number of attempted suicides per 100 people is an astounding 41%. This is attempts and not actuals, as I said, but it gives you some sense of how prevalent suicide is in the trans community. Indeed, I know this firsthand. For those of you who have read my book, you know that I idealized about the thin nylon rope that was part of my 8-person camping tent. I got to 4.75 on my 5.0 suicide scale. But I stopped when I realized that killing myself would leave my 2 daughters feeling exactly how I feel about my father. I broke a cycle, and I am so incredibly lucky to be able to stand here and tell you that. I realize that many times Transgender Day of Remembrance focuses on those who have been killed or beaten or gone missing because of their status as transgender. We have the names embedded in our collective memories. Brandon Tina, Larry King, Gwen Arroyo. Or for me and others in the Twin Cities, there is Chrissy Bates, who was the first person murdered in Minneapolis in 2011. The police listed only her male name. That's the case from which I learned the phrase overkill, where someone continues to slash away at a body long after death has resulted, all because of anger and rage. We know this date, as I said, is sacred, and it stems from the 1998 beating to death of Ruth Hester in Boston. We've documented the murders of trans people ever since. Last night, I looked at the primary website that tallies the death of trans people. For the 12 months since a year ago today, the website listed 70 deaths, many of them in the overkill category, and many of them in South America, particularly Brazil. However, that continent has no monopoly. Trans people were murdered across the world, including in the United States. By no means do I want to diminish or marginalize or forget the ultimate sacrifice so many have made, all because they simply wanted to live their lives as themselves. They should and must be remembered and honored on this day. Yet we don't talk enough about trans people, and for that matter, all the other alphabet letters, the L's, the G's, the B's, and Q's, and further about the other humans who don't have an alphabet letter, who time and again leave this world through their own hands, their own devices. It is a separate tragedy of epidemic proportions. Indeed, the national suicide rate now surpasses the number of people killed in car accidents every year. Just last week, a 16-year-old Brainerd, Minnesota high school student killed himself when he was just suspected of being attracted to an openly gay fellow student. So let us ask why, in general, but more particularly, why do trans people attempt and then succeed at suicide in such high numbers? Why do we hate ourselves so very much that death, the utter nothingness of death, seems the only viable option? Why do we feel we have no choice about whether to live or die? How is it that we have a society that nurtures pets, cats, dogs, exotic fish, to the tune of billions of dollars a year, but yet can't find it within its collective self to nurture humans who are simply seeking to live their lives authentically and genuinely? For starters, there's fear. We're human, which means that fear is part of our everyday existence. We need to understand that. We also need to realize that fear is at the root cause of so many negative things and the genesis for much of the hatred in this world. For most trans people, fear is endemic to our lives. Growing up, I was the poster child relative to fear. I lived in an alcoholic household with a father who often went missing. I vividly recall laying in my bed until midnight or 1 or 2 in the morning, scared to death, waiting to hear the moan of the garage door and rumble of the Oldsmobile, meaning that my drunk father had made it home yet again. On a few nights, he didn't make it home. By the time I was a college freshman, I had learned the phrases arraignment and pre-sentence investigation. Rippling from that was yet more fear that I'd never be able to survive in the world alone. This fueled a tremendous insecurity and lack of self-confidence. Is any of this ringing true to anyone? When I pictured myself as an adult, it was hard to imagine me as successful. I only saw a loser, someone who'd never be able to achieve anything. Most of all, fear worked to keep me from understanding my true self. Because I was so afraid, I spent all of my energy on simply trying to survive as a boy and then a man. Never mind that from age 8 or so, I had gut tugs pulling at me, telling me that I was different. Never mind that I started wearing girls' underwear at age 11. Or that as a teenager I began fantasizing about same-sex attractions and being adored as a woman by men. All of that was too big. I was scared to death that if I opened the bottle, turned on the tap, my gender genie would gush forth, and I'd lose any chance for a successful life. I know that these truths and these thoughts, this stuffing, compartmentalizing, suffering, are all too common for trans people. They are our fears. They are what holds us back. And for many, they are also what kill us. I know, though, there's even more fear out there, plenty of fear to go around. For many trans people in our country, that includes my dear home state of Iowa, there's a pronounced fear of being hurt or killed if we ever let that genie out of the bottle. If we ever live as our true self, genetic males who are really female, like Chrissy Bates, I've spoken of, or genetic females who are really male, like Brendan Tina. That oppression wears on you. And God forbid if the secret comes out, God forbid if a closeted trans woman does something so normal as wear painted nails in public, there's the fear. Will someone hurt me for this? Who will yell at me because of this? Will I lose my apartment or job over wearing pink nails? On the other side of the fear equation, there are the hate mongers, the ignorant people who fail to even recognize their common humanity. Consider the November 7 issue of Rolling Stone magazine and Sabrina Rubin Erdely's story about Coy Mathis, a 6-year-old who made Colorado history because her parents, her brave parents, successfully fought for elementary school bathroom access. Coy, genetically male, has identified as female since the earliest age. Erdely writes about those who hate us in this room. Quote, "Is that not the craziest thing you ever heard?" Mike Huckabee asked at October's right-wing Voters' Values Summit, speaking of California's anti-discrimination law requiring bathroom and locker room access for gender-variant students. California Republicans have already targeted its repeal as a top priority. Earlier this year, House Republicans tried to strip the Violence Against Women Act, the frickin' Violence Against Women Act, of its protection for transgender women. And Arizona State Rep. John Kavanaugh introduced a bill that would have made it a crime for trans people to use their preferred bathrooms. Fox News commentators vehemently oppose any accommodation of trans kids in schools, something Bill O'Reilly calls anarchy and madness. Throw in for good measure one more historical fact. Trans people aren't protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act because North Carolina Senator Jesse Helms believed trans people were an abomination, like pedophiles. That's where we are. It's excluded. The language says trans people and pedophiles were next to each other in the statute. Thankfully, Jesse Helms is gone. I wish that his bigotry was too. It's that bigotry that accounts for why transgender people have legal protection in only 18 states, including Washington, D.C. Within the last 3 weeks, I've spoken in both Ohio and Missouri, states where trans people have absolutely no legal rights. Kansas, next door to Missouri, that's for those of you who have failed United States geography, actually passed a LGBT protection law only to then have it repealed by popular vote. Can you imagine feeling safe and legal one day and then waking up the next to find that you've become an outlaw? Think about it, that society suddenly says, you're not good enough to protect. You're not one of us. As a trans person, my response to all of this public demeaning is, what have I done to you? Why can't you not simply leave me alone? Why do you have to diminish me or target me or the extreme? Why do you have to kill me? And yet again, the answer is fear. Trans people who transition make other people uncomfortable. Non-trans folks don't know how to react. Confused and unwilling to consider alternative perspectives, they believe we're sexual deviants. Many people consider us crazy. What do you mean that you have to wear a dress? You've been wearing men's shirts for 40 years. Why, after all that time, do you have to wear that Donna Karen sleeveless dress in January with 2 feet of snow on the ground? For many, fear translates to attacks, verbal and physical. And of course, when you have national figures egging people on, it's so much easier for others to view trans people as less than 100% human. That makes us a whole lot easier to kill or harm. It also makes it a lot easier for trans people to kill themselves. I haven't even started on the idea that many transphobic people actually harbor their own gender variant secrets. So, can you imagine Bill O'Reilly in a cute sky blue Anne Klein jumper with matching pillbox hat and shoes? Let's hold on to that image for a moment. Now that would be a reason to tune in to Fox. Let me offer another reason why trans people kill themselves in so many greater percentages than the rest of society. It has to do with God, however you want to define him or her. Again, much of the fear-mongering I quoted above is rooted in the idea that a person's quote-unquote gender is God-given. Indeed, one of my best friends from College, upon learning that I was transgendered, asked if I was contemplating surgery. When I told him indeed I was, he immediately responded that surgery was just plain wrong, that the science around gender identity was very shaky, and that I didn't have the right to tinker with what God had given me for a body. It was a pretty remarkable statement, considering that my fellow co-graduate was a well-respected psychiatrist. What trans person would want him to treat them for gender dysphoria? And some of you are well aware that this week, just yesterday, that there was a minister in Pennsylvania who was defrocked because he had married his gay son. And the church gave him the chance to say that he was sorry, and he said no, he wasn't sorry. Plus he has 2 more gay kids coming along, and he wants to do their marriages. So the church defrocked him. And the reason I pulled that story, apart from how intolerant some religions can be, the reason I pulled it, and this is quoted from CNN, they interviewed his son. And his son reported that he came out at age 17, revealing that he had contemplated suicide over his struggle with sexual identity and his church's stance on homosexuality. Quote, he had heard messages that were hateful from the church, from the culture around him, that told him you're not normal, that you're not valid, you're a freak. Unquote. This is the society that we're in. Yet, there is one more key factor for our self-hatred, for what fuels our overwhelming depression. Loss. The people and things we lose by coming out as trans. In my case, I swore that I wouldn't hurt Lydia, my wife, the love of my life. We started out as high school sweethearts, and before it was over, we'd been together for 32 years. For a long time, I secretly struggled with my gender issues, the idea of taking my own life, of checking out, without anyone knowing about my struggle, seemed like a far better option than breaking Lydia's heart or the hearts of my 2 daughters, and the divorce and hurt that would follow. But then I thought about my father and his suicide, and how being a survivor can be an overwhelming burden in and of itself. I know what it means to ask the questions. Why did he do it? Didn't he love us enough to get help? And most of all, the big super duper suicide survivor questions. Was there something that I could do was there something that I did to cause it, or could I have done something differently to have prevented it? So, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to ask, am I the only person in this room touched by suicide? Who else in this room has had a family member, a loved one, a friend suffer self-harm? Could you raise your hand? Look around, everyone. That is an astounding number of people. Thank you. you know, we need to honor trans people, but it doesn't matter if those hands were raised for trans or L's or G's or B's or T's. Those hands were raised for one thing that everyone has in common. They were raised for human beings who are no longer here with us. They were living, breathing, suffering, loving, hurting humans, worthy of life regardless of gender or sexual orientations, worthy of love and happiness and respect. Fear, religious fanaticism, loss, and a host of other reasons are why we have this day of remembrance. I could go on and on about all the challenges, all of the darkness that people face, trans people face, and the L's and the G's and the T's and whomever else. But that's not why I'm here. That's not the reason I drove 200 miles and spent the entire day in Ames talking to folks. I believe that life is to be lived, not simply endured. As a man, I was about doom and gloom. As Ellie Krug, I'm about hope and compassion and loving kindness towards oneself and others. Hold on a sec. That was the intermission. Okay. All right. Are you ready for the uplifting part now? So, please let me report from the other side of the fence, from the other end of the bridge, like some messenger from the front lines, whatever metaphor you want to use. It is better living as your true self. It's not perfect. Nothing in life is a panacea, but it's a whole lot better. Light years better. 1,000 gold stars better. A 4.4.4.0 better. The voice in my head, you need to live your own life, is gone. The gut tugs pulling at me to stop masquerading as a man are gone. I am living an authentic life, and that one fact is both quite wonderful and extraordinary. When I look at my body now, I see a woman, the real me. I have this incredible sense of completeness. And all of the compartments, all of the boxes I had put myself in are gone. Nada. As I talk to other trans people who have transitioned, I hear the very same thing. Yes, it was hell to get here, but thank goodness we were able to do it. I also don't mean to imply that everyone has to surgically transition to be complete. Nor do I imply that you have to be transgender to be complete. I just want to make that clear, all right? Not at all. The statistics are that only 15 to 20% of trans people transition surgically. That number is slowly increasing as more health insurance covers gender reassignment surgery, but the fact is that most trans people never have surgery. Instead, what I mean is that trans people should have the right to get to where they need, where they want on the gender expression spectrum. They should be accorded the right to live their lives free of harassment, free of violence, free of death by others or by their own hand. What does it take to get to this place of completeness? Now remember, I'm not an expert. I'm just a survivor. Some luck for sure. A lot of hard work, too. A lot of believing in oneself when others don't. I could talk about all of that for hours, too, and I will spare you. No, for me, getting to Ellen, living post-transition took one more essential thing. It took me finally saying that I am worth the effort. It took me moving from hating myself to loving myself. And that, my friends, is the crux of my message. The bullies of the world tell us that we're freaks or worse. This is in bold. Please hear me as I shout from the top of my lungs. Do not allow those words to settle in. Do not let them melt your psyche or crush your heart. Close your ears and eyes to the hatred. Repel all negativity with every ounce of your spirit. Instead, remember that you are a human being worthy of breathing the same air, drinking from the same water, and walking the same roads as anyone else. We all deserve the right to live our lives genuinely and authentically. Easy words to utter, Ellie Krug. But tell us really, how does a trans person, young or closeted or scared to death, ever get to loving oneself, ever get to self-compassion? My answer is 3 words. So if you're writing this for credit, these are the ones to get down. You'll be tested on these. Here are the 3 words: honesty, kindness, and gratitude. Let me address the first, honesty. For much of my life, I thought I could choose my gender. I thought I could stay a boy and then a man. I believed that if I only did X or Y, my gender gut tugs would go away. I believed that if I worked just a bit harder, sacrificed just a bit more, I could stay married to Lydia, the love of my life. I told several of my therapists this. I'm not here for you to help me figure myself out. Instead, I want you to give me the right strategy for putting up with being a man. Of course, I was completely, totally, and absolutely wrong. In reality, those gut tugs weren't tugs at all. In reality, they were punches and pokes from the inside. The female who roamed within my spirit was desperately trying to come out. As long as I lied to myself, she never saw daylight. However, once I stopped lying, once I understood there is no choice here, everything opened up. I felt freedom for the very first time in my life. It was like trying a new flavored milkshake with the best and most delicious ice cream. Oh my God, I didn't know something could taste that unbelievably good. The process of coming out as our true selves is nothing more or less than the net result of honest reflection. It's the product of laying in our beds wide awake, night after night, month after month, year after year, with a pounding away at our souls. When we stop lying to ourselves about choice or whatever else you want to call it, where we simply say, enough, this is who I am. Honesty begets freedom. Freedom gives you strength, the strength to endure, the strength to do the hard work of living a full life. Honesty also gives you the strength to say, hell no, to thoughts about suicide, and the strength to ignore the bullies and Bill O'Reillys of the world. My second word, kindness. It's such a simple concept, kindness. It's nothing more than sharing our common humanity, reveling in it, and being open to others. We learn the power of kindness within seconds of our birth. A nurse's touch, a mother's cooing, a heartfelt welcoming into the world. Preschool teachers instill kindness. Everyone needs to share. Kindness can be as simple as giving a street musician a spare buck or hugging someone hurting. It can be a simple question. Are you okay? Would you like to talk? Or it can be as grand as traveling across the world to assist typhoon victims. Let me share an example of bullying being met by extreme kindness. Twice within the last month, there have been national news stories about restaurant servers being refused tips because their customers believed the servers were gay. One incident happened in Kansas City, the other in New Jersey. In both instances, neither server had even hinted to the customers about their sexual orientation. The most recent incident happened just a week ago. CNN reported that the New Jersey server, a 22-year-old woman and former Marine, introduced herself as Dana, D-A-Y-N-A, to the customers, a man and a woman and 2 children, 2 girls. According to the news report, the woman in the group looked at Dana and responded, "I thought you were going to say your name is Dan." Obviously, the woman was reacting to how Dana dressed and appeared, something that we T people understand all too well. The customers left Dana no tip for a $93 bill and instead wrote on the check, quote, "I'm sorry, but I cannot tip because I do not agree with what your lifestyle is and how you live your life." Give me a frickin' break. Dana wrote about this on Facebook. A group called Have a Gay Day, I didn't know that existed, but worthy of looking up, picked up the story, and then it went viral. From there, in less than 2 days, people started sending Dana tips. The tips have come in from across the world: Germany, South Africa, England, San Diego. By the time CNN had reported it, Dana had received over $2,000, money that she was going to donate to the Wounded Warriors Project. There was a similar outpouring of support for the Kansas City restaurant server. People lined up at the restaurant and waited hours just for the opportunity to be served by him and to generously tip him. The power of human kindness. Each person who reached out in these situations represents someone saying, "You're okay, Dana. You're simply a human making your way through the world." Yet over time we forget the power of kindness. The idea that we should do something for others out of our common humanity becomes displaced. We live in a world with which messages that selfishness, greed, and power bring rewards, where it's better to hunker down alone than it is to reach out to others. Kindness toward others is crucial, yes, but there's another type of kindness that I want to focus on too. The act of being kind to ourselves, where we give ourselves a break, where we stop measuring our worth against the worth of others, where the number of Facebook friends someone has isn't a defining point as to whether or not we're worthy, or whether that invite to the Friday night party comes through. Kindness to ourselves, self-compassion, is core to living an authentic life. I was at a wedding last week where the minister spoke of love as necessitating that one spouse, the wife, love the other spouse, the husband, more than herself. I wanted to jump up and shout, "Hold on! You've got it all wrong!" Of course, I didn't do that. Despite rumors about my outspokenness, I'm not that crazy assertive. Besides, it was my niece's wedding, and my brother wouldn't have been very pleased with me. Seriously, though, think about what I'm saying here. We have to love ourselves more than anyone else, and I'm not talking about selfishness or greed or narcissism. Instead, I'm saying that we have to do the hard work of accepting who we are and being okay with it. Often we can't get to loving ourselves without help. I went through 7 or 8 therapists. Remember, those therapy licenses I earned in 22 states, before I found the one therapist who helped me love, Ellen Krug. I call her Sam the Hammer in my book because she wouldn't let me off the hook. She pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed until I realized that loving me was more important than loving anyone else. In fact, it's impossible to genuinely love someone else without first loving yourself and having self-compassion. Okay, I've covered honesty and kindness. Now let me tackle gratitude. When I lived as a man, I had everything anyone could want. A beautiful, loving wife, 2 great daughters, a house in the best neighborhood, a money-making law practice, even a fancy BMW. Yet I didn't have the one thing that I needed more than anything else. I didn't have me, Ellie Krug. Despite all of those things and all of the immense love by others, I was never at peace, never happy. I knew that I should feel extremely grateful, but I just couldn't get there. Today, I drive a nearly 4-year-old Honda. I live paycheck to paycheck. I'm alone without a romantic relationship. And in all likelihood, when I die, it will be alone. And I am extremely grateful for all that I have. I am grateful that I can live my life as my own self, no longer an imposter as a man. That great social philosopher of the ages, Oprah Winfrey, has said, "Be thankful for what you have. You'll end up having more. If you concentrate on what you don't have, you will never, ever have enough." So very true, but I'd put it a different way. Living your truth allows others to live their own truths. Neuroscientists have discovered that living with gratitude both opens one's heart to the world and activates positive emotion centers in the brain. In other words, being grateful can help us to live a healthier life. It will also lead to compassion for others, and that's where I am going with this. It's quite impossible to have compassion for anyone else if we don't have compassion for ourselves. Gratitude is a key component of self-compassion. It gives us the perspective to know that others are hurting. Gratitude helps us understand the power of touch, the power of reaching out. Do you know what is the most powerful drug in the world? It's not cocaine, not heroin, it's not Old Milwaukee. It is touch. We as human beings will do almost anything in order to have touch from another human being. Physical touch and emotional touch. Gratitude allows us to show up for others. When we do so, we work to end the suffering of others. Let me offer one more thought about the power of gratitude. It keeps us from running away from those who we've lost as we've made our way to living authentic lives. You know, if you're transgender and you've transitioned, you can get in a room with trans people, and after a while, you start talking about your journeys. And there's a phrase for transgender people that every trans person who's transitioned in this room knows. And that phrase is, "Who have you lost?" Who has not taken this journey with you? And so, gratitude allows us to stay open to those people, to not turn our backs to them or close our hearts, but to be ready for them if and when they come back to us. And many times they do. Many times they realize that they've made a mistake by shutting us out. Gratitude gives us the strength and wisdom to remain open. For those of you in this room on this Transgender Day of Remembrance, it is gratitude that brings us together, our collective gratitude that we're alive, that we're making it, and the recognition that we are all human, living and breathing the same air, occupying the same space. In that sense, this sacred day represents something other than death or loss. It represents the hope that someday, through compassion and kindness, maybe all transgender people will be able to live authentic and fulfilling lives anywhere in the world. And I would add, through compassion and kindness, maybe all of us, whether you have an alphabet letter or not, can live the life that you deserve. True and genuine and authentic lives. Maybe someday there will no longer be websites dedicated to documenting the number of trans people who have been murdered in the past year. Now, let me go back to that Des Moines lawyer's extraordinary phone call after Christine Daniels' death. What would cause someone to reach out like that? After all, the Des Moines lawyer didn't know how I'd react. He had no clue as to whether I'd be offended. Worse yet, what if I was suicidal like Christine Daniels? He could have had a real mess on his hands. The phone call could have gone on as I cried and hurt. Even with all of those risks, that Des Moines lawyer picked up the telephone and dialed me. I call it going into the gray, doing something that risks making another person uncomfortable, and yet still doing it. Why? Because the Des Moines lawyer understood that all of us are human, that invariably we are interconnected, that each of us has value unto our own selves. As far as I know, that Des Moines lawyer wasn't gay or trans or any other alphabet letter. He was barely even a friend. Yet he picked up the phone and called. Because of him, because to him, I mattered. Because he believed I was worth all the risks inherent in making such a call. Because he cared. He cared about me. I challenge all of you in this room to dedicate yourselves to going into the grave for other people. I challenge you not to fear awkwardness or discomfort or uncertainty when a person, any human being, a friend, a family member, or even a complete stranger is hurting. I challenge you to reach out to others because reaching out, going into the gray, is the epitome of compassion. Give that person a kind word, a hand on the shoulder, or 5 minutes of your time to sit and talk. Reaching out is the essence of being human. It's proof that another human being matters to you. Further, reaching out may help someone else decide that living is better than dying. They may think that if someone else believes they matter, maybe they should believe it too. Reaching out can save someone's life. The ripple effect can be that profound. Please know that all of you in this room matter to me. My fellow Iowans, all of you should matter to one another. It is what we owe each other as humans. It is the sheer power of compassion. Thank you for your kind attention tonight. I wish all of you the very best as you go forward in life. Thank you. I think we have a period of time to take questions. We started a little late, and so if you can stay for questions, that would be great. Hold on a second.
So yeah, we're going to take some questions, so feel free to hold on to your seat and raise your hand, and we'll come around with some mics here to answer some questions. Again, another round of applause for Ellie. Thank you so very much. If you are interested in buying Ellie's book, they are available for sale. You can use a credit card as well. Over this way. There we go, folks raising their hands. And there's some food and refreshments over here as well, so feel free to grab some as we continue our dialogue here over the next 15 or 20 minutes or so. So whoever's got questions, let's start out with a question.
And so, just so you know, as it relates to questions, if you haven't figured it out already, I'm a pretty open book. So, for the most part, I'm really good with any question. So, ask the gambit. Okay?
So, Ellie, I have a question about the transitioning from male to female and your perceptions of how people treat you as your gender. I know there's been research that says a lot of male to female transgenders don't understand what it is to be a woman and put themselves into spaces that they would as men not necessarily be in danger. Have you experienced that, or can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when I was a man, I enjoyed great white male privilege with a deep voice. It got me a lot of stuff. It got me to win trials, and it had people pay attention to me, like they wouldn't pay attention to women, for sure. And when I could, there was no way I could have understood how the tables would change, how the deck would become differently stacked when I transitioned. So, for example, I found very quickly that the things that I would say as a man, that would when I would garner attention, then would say as a woman, people would, walk out of the room. They would start checking they'd start checking their phones, and I would lose their attention. And you asked specifically about me putting myself in places that I didn't realize I was putting myself in because I hadn't mentally switched. And so about, not even a year after, about a year after I transitioned, I decided I was very tired of sitting at home. So I decided to go out dancing one night. And I went to this club where there was a rock group that I liked. And lo and behold, a man came up to me and asked me to dance. And so that was great. And so we started dancing. We're out on the floor dancing. And I didn't realize it because it was pointed out to me afterwards, but I was dancing with him as if I was a man. I mean, I was leading this guy around. I'm flipping him all over the place, And, that has a funny aspect to it. The unfortunate part was that his brother came up to me afterwards. So we got done dancing, a couple of dances. His brother came up to me. And I was actually dressed like this. That was part of the problem. I was overdressed for the club where it was. But the brother came up to me and he said, "Are you a woman?" Or, he said, "Are you a man?" And I said, no, I'm a woman. And then he kept asking me. And I just absolutely ran out of the bar. I didn't look out, I didn't look back, and I just ran away. So, yeah, it happens. So, other questions? Oh, you look like a group with a lot of questions. Go ahead and ask away, don't worry.
Hi, I was wondering, how did, you said that you had a wife and 2 kids. I was wondering how they took it when you went through transformation.
So I had been with Lydia for 32 years, and we were absolutely soulmates. We had absolutely, as far as I was concerned, people would come up to us and say, "We wish our marriage was as good as yours." And so part of what took me so long to transition, to be honest with myself, is because I absolutely loved her more than I loved myself. But once I made the decision that I needed to be true to myself, I left. It took a long time to leave. It took a lot of compassion to leave, but I left. And then when I did that, it broke her heart, and it broke the heart of one of my daughters. I have a daughter who is 21, who is my champion. I have a daughter who's 23, and this is very difficult for her. I mean, we still talk by telephone, but not in person. And my ex-wife and I still talk. We co-parent very well, but in terms of, it's just far too difficult for us to be close. There's just too much loss.
Oh, that's okay. I'm so used to that. This is kind of a random question, but what's your favorite part of yourself? Just anything. Oh, God. Could be anything.
Well, I can tell you my least favorite part is my voice. I would say that my favorite part of myself is my heart. That's what I would say. I just gave a talk about compassion and gratitude and kindness. You have to understand, that talk has taken nearly 57 years for me to give. Because when I was a man, while I had a very good heart, I mean, I've always been a relatively very good person. But when I was a man, society demands different things of men, particularly if you're an aggressive, attack dog lawyer like I was. My clients hired me because I was the kind of lawyer that went and got them, And so it was, whenever I did acts of kindness as a man, I had to hide them, and I did a lot of things anonymously so it wouldn't tarnish what the image was. And frankly, because I wasn't true to myself, it was extremely hard for me to allow my whole compassion to show through, because there was this blockage. It was just a blockage, a blinder, keeping me from doing that. So, thank you for asking. That was a great question. A couple of people over here.
You mentioned, and I totally agree, quite negative about a lot of the religious organizations being very hostile to any type of homosexuality. and likewise there are the politicians that come to fore. On the other side, are there any politicians that should be raised up or given a shout out for the bravery? And are there any faith communities that are seeing the light?
Sure, thank you. Well, politicians, you know, I mean, it's very hard for me to identify politicians that I really feel a great affinity for. I will tell you this, religious-wise, you know, I'm Buddhist, and I'm not here to evangelize about that. But I will tell you that it is not really a religion as much as it's a way of thinking of life. And for me, I would not be here if I wasn't a Buddhist, because Buddhism allowed me to be able to overcome my fear. It gave me it gave me the strength and the strategy in my head on how to say, okay, wherever the chips fall, as Ellen Krug, I'm going to let them fall. And so, in that sense, I'm very thankful. I mean, I know that the Unitarian Church is extremely welcoming to trans people and to G's and L's and B's generally. I will also, though, put in a plug for the Human Rights Campaign. The folks, the trans folks in here, know that we got thrown under the bus by the HRC about 6 or 7 years ago when they were doing the first round of Edna. The HRC has changed. It has changed light years. It has new leadership, it has a new philosophy, and it is fighting for trans rights. And so, and I know this firsthand because earlier this year they came to me, the local chapter in Minneapolis came to me, and they asked me if they could sponsor a reading for me. If they could sponsor it. You know, and by the way, Ellie, you can sell all your books you want, and we don't need any cut of whatever those proceeds are. And they did it. And so I ended up doing a reading in a bowling alley. And there were about 40 people came, G's and L's and B's, and it was a delightful event. It was just really extraordinary. So if anybody's harboring ill will against the HRC, my urge is go take another look at them. They have a new approach. Any other questions? Here's one.
Okay, sorry. So now that we understand that your daughters are 21 and 23, you said, I guess my question is, if they decide to end up having children, how do you plan on explaining to their kids, you know, your story? Like, do you plan on telling them right from the beginning when they're really young, or do you want to wait until, you know, your daughters are comfortable explaining it to them?
Wow.
Sorry, that's kind of deep.
Thank you for making me feel old. You know, I don't know. I've got a daughter that she's not even out of college yet, and having a child hopefully is the last thing on her mind. It is certainly on mine, last on my mind. You know what? I would approach it the way I've approached it right now, which is to be respectful of their space. You know, the oldest daughter who has difficulty with this, but who is trying. I did a piece in Access Lines several months ago entitled "The Song Whisperer," because my daughter, who has difficulty with me, speaks to me through song lyrics. You know, and she had sent me, and now I won't remember it, Jolette Johnson's song "Cameron." She included the link and said, "Here." And does anybody here know that song? Okay. And so you know that song is guaranteed to make you cry. And it's a song about a little trans girl, boy to girl. And the tagline in the song is, "You're not an alien, you're human." It is so incredibly fulfilling and uplifting. And so I urge all of you, Jolette Johnson, Cameron, and my daughter, the one who's having difficulty, sent me that song. So I know that she loves me, I know that she's trying, and I will remain open to her until I die. So, thank you. Great question. I hope I don't have to answer it soon. Got a couple down here. Sure.
Really who you were and what was going on. And I don't know if you practice law anymore at all, but if you do, or even if you don't, would you practice differently now? I mean, take different kinds of cases and so on and so forth.
So for those of you who didn't hear the question was, in my book, I write about being an attack dog as a man. And the question was any of that attack, anger, fueled by my frustration over not being able to become myself? Excuse me. And then the second part of it was, if I practice law now, and how am I different as a woman compared to being a man? So the first question, the answer is absolutely. I was bottled up, pressure cooker, trying to be perfect. And I tried to be perfect. Everybody in my office had to be perfect. I went through secretaries, legal assistants, and lawyers like I went through print cartridges. And because nobody was good enough for me, and I'm trying to be perfect, and you better be perfect too. And so, and it was much easier for me. It was I did defense work, and I represented two of the most friendly LGBT industries in the United States: railroads and trucking companies. And so I did defense work. I represented them when they were getting sued by families where somebody had been killed or people who had suffered horrible injuries. And it was much easier for me to ignore that human suffering when I was ignoring my own suffering. Way easier. Now that I am a woman and able to live my life as who I am, I don't do any more representation work, but I did for a while once I was able to transition. And I was much, much softer with people. And I decided I no longer wanted to do defense work, that I wanted to do plaintiff's work, that I wanted to represent people who had been hurt, who had been killed. Because you know what? I understood, and I now know I understand what it means to suffer. So, great question.
Okay, Ellie, just first off, I want to start off by saying thank you again for being here. It was a very good speech, and it was a very good talk. For me, in my personal journey as a gay man, for the longest time, I've been hoping for others to be allies for me, but I often forget that there are other identities and there are other people who need me and everyone else to be allies to them. And so I realize that you don't purport to be like the voice for all transgender people, but what would be one or a few ways that I, as a gay man, that anyone in any other type of identity or any other walk of life could be an ally to you, to the trans community? Because I'd really like to know.
That is just great. Well, a couple of ways. One would be to collaborate with whatever trans organization is identified on the campus. Host some kind of a social event together. Have a mixer. Go out to dinner with the trans folk. Get to know them. Figure out how is it possible that maybe we can do some good together here on campus. But more on a personal level, like on just a human to human level. Many trans people who either pre-transition or are transitioning, many of them, particularly male to female, stick out. They do. It's just, and there's this awkwardness and and not everybody is as lucky as Ellie Krug because, you're looking at a face that had a super, 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 super duper facelift. And so, I'm lucky, extremely lucky. If I don't open my mouth, I'm really good. And so, but not everyone is that lucky. And you know what? That is that gray zone that I talked about at the end of the speech. That is the place where you go, where you don't, boy, am I going to make somebody uncomfortable, or what if this goes south on me? But I would urge you, there are countless opportunities to go into the gray zone for trans folks. You see somebody walking by themselves, make an effort, just speed up a few steps. Hey, how you doing? You see a trans person sitting alone at, what do you call it, the Commons here? Go and sit with them. Buy them a beer at the bar. It's just, there are countless ways, but what I think is most important, and which your question absolutely embodies, is that you know that it is important to reach out. And I ask that you convey that to what you can do is convey that to your friends and your colleagues. And you can instill in them. And by the way, if there is trans bashing, okay, for example, the word tranny is not a word to use. And calling somebody who is gender variant a drag queen, probably not a good phrase to use. And so what you can do is you can speak up and say, hey, dude, not cool. The dude will get it. That's all you have to do. You move on. But you know what? It takes some guts to do that. But most of all, what it takes for somebody to do that is your understanding and recognition that you have common humanity with the person who's being bashed. Thank you.
So I think we're going to conclude with questions. I know Ellie will stick around for some additional dialogue today. One more round of applause for Ellie and joining us today.
Thank you very much. I really, really appreciated it. 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 Really